Have you ever noticed yourself creating conversations in your mind that never actually took place? Maybe you're standing in the shower, taking a walk by yourself, or lying awake at night when your mind suddenly builds an incredibly detailed scene. You're debating with someone, explaining your thoughts flawlessly, or imagining a future moment where everything finally works out exactly as you hoped. The strange thing is that none of it is happening, yet the emotions feel completely genuine. You might experience excitement, frustration, nervousness, or even relief from a conversation that exists only inside your imagination. And if this happens regularly, you've probably asked yourself at least once, why do I keep inventing situations that never become reality? From a psychological perspective, this behavior is actually much more widespread than most people realize, but it's not simply random daydreaming. In many situations, it's your brain attempting to deal with something deeper beneath the surface. People who frequently create imaginary scenarios often do it without even realizing it. You're heading somewhere, and suddenly you're picturing yourself explaining something to another person. Or maybe you're revisiting an interaction from earlier in the day. Except in your imagination, this time you say exactly the right thing, deliver the perfect response, or come up with the ideal comeback. Sometimes you picture future success, recognition, or major accomplishments. Other times, your imagination moves in the opposite direction. Your mind begins constructing worst-case situations involving events that haven't happened at all. You imagine mistakes, misunderstandings, or conflicts that may never occur in reality. And what's fascinating is that your brain reacts to these imagined events almost as if they were real experiences. Your heart rate shifts, your emotions engage, and your body responds. Psychologists often describe this process as mental simulation. Your brain continuously creates simulations of possible events and outcomes. In fact, this ability is one of the reasons humans are so effective at planning ahead. Before you take action in real life, your brain quietly tests different possibilities behind the scenes. In many ways, imagination functions like a rehearsal room. Athletes use this process deliberately. They mentally picture their performance before a competition begins. Public speakers often visualize themselves delivering a presentation before stepping onto the stage. However, for many individuals, this simulation system activates even when there is no practical reason for it. That's when these imaginary situations start showing up repeatedly throughout the day. But there's another layer to this that many people never recognize. Individuals who frequently imagine fictional scenarios usually aren't doing it purely for amusement. Often, their mind is trying to process or resolve something emotional. Sometimes it's an unfinished conversation. Sometimes it's uncertainty about the future. And sometimes it's a subtle desire to maintain a sense of control. We'll return to that idea shortly, because once you begin noticing this pattern, it becomes easier to understand why certain people imagine scenarios far more often than others. Not every imagined scenario follows the same pattern. Psychologists commonly observe three major categories. The first is argumentative scenarios. These involve imagining yourself explaining your position, defending your perspective, or coming out on top in a disagreement. Often, these are conversations that a person wishes had unfolded differently. The second category involves future achievement scenarios. Here, people imagine accomplishing something meaningful, receiving recognition, or proving themselves to others. These fantasies can feel inspiring, but they can also become a form of psychological escape. The third category consists of worst-case scenarios. This is when the mind begins predicting negative outcomes before anything has even happened. What if they misunderstand me? What if I don't succeed? What if everything falls apart? The brain starts preparing reactions to situations that may never become reality. But let's revisit the deeper reason we mentioned earlier. This is where the picture becomes much clearer. People who frequently imagine fictional scenarios often share one characteristic. They spend a considerable amount of time thinking about how other people view them. Not necessarily because they're seeking attention, but because their minds are constantly evaluating social interactions. As a result, the brain creates imaginary conversations as a method of processing those experiences. It's almost as though your mind is continuously rehearsing for future social encounters. However, when this habit becomes excessive, imagination stops functioning as a useful tool and begins turning into a repetitive mental cycle. Sometimes these imagined experiences become more satisfying than real-life interactions. That's because in your imagination, you control every detail. You always know what to say, people respond exactly the way you hope, and events unfold according to your expectations. Real life rarely operates that way. And that's one reason some people become trapped in these mental simulations. Not because they want to escape reality, but because imagination offers a version of events that feels understandable, organized, and predictable. But here's where an important psychological shift occurs. Imagination itself isn't the issue. In fact, imagination is one of the most powerful abilities the human brain possesses. It allows us to plan, innovate, solve problems, and prepare for future challenges. The problem arises only when imagination begins replacing action, because genuine growth takes place in reality, not inside simulations. So if you're someone who regularly imagines scenarios that never happen, it doesn't necessarily mean anything is wrong with you. In many cases, it simply means your mind is highly active when it comes to processing possibilities. You're mentally practicing, evaluating situations, and trying to make sense of the world around you. The important thing is learning to recognize when imagination is helping you prepare and when it is quietly becoming a place of avoidance. Because the mind is remarkably skilled at creating stories, but the experiences that shape your life most deeply will always happen beyond those stories. They exist in real conversations, real experiences, and real moments, the ones that imagination can never completely predict.